I'm Madison Tran. I'm 31, and to most of my family, I'm still just the one who dropped out to pour drinks. That's what they whisper at family gatherings, if they remember to invite me. They don't know that every Tuesday night, 25 veterans sit in silence in a dim-lit bar I built from scratch, crying, sharing, healing. They don't know because they've never asked. I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia. Small town, tight leash. My parents came to the U.S. from Vietnam with nothing but a scholarship and a suitcase, then built a life they were damn proud of. Dad's the principal at Jefferson Magnet High, where kids cry if they get a B. Mom owns a busy family clinic on Broad Street. Our dinner table was an altar of expectations, and success was the only acceptable offering. My brothers understood the script. Brian became a radiologist. Kevin's now some fancy electrical engineer at Lockheed. Me? I was the artsy one. Sensitive. Curious. Always asking questions they didn't have time to answer. I lasted 2 years in college before I walked out of my biology midterm and never went back. That's the part they remember. What they don't remember is why. They don't remember my best friend Jackie, who died of a fentanyl overdose after being misdiagnosed and given the wrong medication. They don't remember how I sat with her mom in the ER waiting room, both of us begging nurses for answers they didn't have time to give. And they definitely don't remember how the attending physician, a man who barely looked me in the eye, scribbled something illegible and moved on to his next patient. That day rewired something in me. I couldn't stomach the idea of joining a system that didn't care about the Jackies of the world. So I quit. I got a job bartending at a dive off Route 7. Mom cried. Dad told the whole extended family I was going through a phase. Aunt Lon offered me a receptionist gig until I figured things out. For years, I showed up to birthdays and weddings just to sit in the corner like a family ghost. Always asked what I was doing with my life. Always pretending I didn't hear the sighs. The lowest point? Brian's graduation dinner at this fancy Vietnamese-French fusion place in D.C. Linen tablecloths, gold-rimmed menus, waiters who judged your shoes. They sat me between Uncle Quock and a cousin I hadn't seen since middle school. My mom spent 10 minutes introducing Brian's friends to every relative at the table. When she finally got to me, she waved her hand vaguely. Oh, Madison's doing something with bars? A manager of some kind, I think. I felt the burn in my cheeks before the wine hit my stomach. I opened my mouth to correct her, to say something, anything, but I couldn't find a version that felt safe. So I just smiled, nodded, took a long sip. That night, I drove back to my apartment above the laundromat and sat at the edge of my bed until sunrise. I remember thinking, they'll never see me. Not for who I really am. But that moment also did something else. It hardened me. I stopped trying to explain. I stopped showing up to things that hurt. And I started building something they couldn't dismiss, even if they tried. I cashed out my savings, maxed out a credit card, and signed a lease on an old, half-burned storefront off Hull Street in Richmond. The brick was cracked. The floor sagged in the middle. There was a raccoon living in the ceiling. But I saw what it could be. I saw a place where people could sit down, take a breath, and not be alone. I saw a bar that didn't serve just drinks, but dignity. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I knew what they'd say. Instead, I poured everything I had into those walls. Sanded wood until my hands bled, learned how to install pipes from YouTube, slept on the floor in a sleeping bag for 2 weeks because the power hadn't been turned on yet. And then, slowly, people started coming in. Some were just neighbors. Others were former military, carrying invisible wounds. One night, a regular named Hector left a note under his glass. First time in 7 years I didn't feel like a burden. Thank you, I kept that note in my wallet. No newspaper wrote about us. No influencer posted a viral video. But week after week, I built something real, while my family still thought I was making mojitos at happy hour. And honestly, I preferred it that way. It was mine, untouched by their pity or their praise. That is, until someone from their world wandered into mine. But that's for the next part of this story. And trust me, it gets messy. I didn't plan to build a business. Honestly, I just wanted to build a space where people like Hector didn't feel like ghosts. The bar opened quietly under a soft yellow awning with no name, just a hand-painted sign that said Haven. We served coffee by day, cocktails by night, but the real draw was what happened on Wednesdays. We called it the quiet hour. A closed-door hour after closing where no music played, no phones buzzed, and veterans or anyone dealing with trauma could just be. No forced conversation, just stillness, tea, sometimes tears. I co-ran the program with Jules Whitaker, a trauma therapist I met at a local mental health event. She was 28 at the time, still paying off student loans and lugging her files in a backpack, but she had this energy that made people exhale the second they met her. She offered to run the first group for free after she saw how serious I was. We didn't advertise it. People just found us. Word of mouth. One vet telling another, "Go to that little place near the laundromat. The girl there knows what she's doing." By the end of our first year, we had 2 full nights a week packed. Local nonprofits started asking questions. Jules got invited to speak on a panel at VCU about trauma-informed spaces. I sat in the back row, beaming while she explained the model we'd built together. She never mentioned me. That was the deal. My choice. It wasn't shame that made me stay invisible. It was protection. I didn't want this place tangled up in my parents' judgment, or worse, their approval. I wanted Haven to exist outside their world. A quiet rebellion built on my own rules. And it worked. For a while. Until one Saturday afternoon, I was restocking the fridge with kombucha. Yes, we serve kombucha. Don't judge. And the bar door creaked open. I figured it was one of our regulars coming early for a session. I looked up and froze. It was Evan, my cousin from Mom's side. The last time I saw him was probably at his law school graduation, where I'd stood in the back row in a borrowed dress, mostly invisible. "Madison?" He blinked, confused. "Wait, this is your place?" I laughed before I could stop myself. "Yeah, don't tell the aunties. They still think I'm waitressing." He looked around, taking it all in. The exposed brick, the velvet couch in the corner, the hand-drawn flyers about mental health pinned near the espresso machine. "This is amazing. Like, actually amazing." I gave the usual brush off. "It's just a bar." But Evan wasn't like the rest of them. He stayed, sat at the bar, ordered tea, asked real questions, listened when I talked about trauma-informed lighting and why we don't use overhead speakers. By the end of the hour, he looked at me and said something that made my stomach twist. "You know, Uncle Min works with the State Veterans Affairs Office now. He'd lose his mind over what you've built here." I shrugged. "It's not for people like him." He raised an eyebrow. "Why not? You built this for vets, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I just handed him a cookie and told him to come back on a Wednesday. Evan did more than that. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a woman at the governor's office. Said she'd heard about Haven through a very passionate young attorney and wanted to come by to learn more. I almost said no, but Jules convinced me otherwise. "They're not your parents," she said gently. "You don't have to prove anything to them." So I said yes. We cleaned the place top to bottom, laid out some of Hector's sketches on the tables. He draws between group sessions, and brewed extra coffee. The woman came, took notes, listened, asked thoughtful questions, then disappeared. I didn't think much of it. Until 2 months later, we got an email saying Haven had been selected for a small pilot grant to expand our model to 2 more cities. The press release didn't use my name. I made sure of that. But then came the local news segment. They wanted to interview Jules. I agreed, as long as they didn't film the staff or mention me. They mostly complied. Except at the end, the reporter smiled and said, "Haven is the brainchild of a young woman from Falls Church who prefers to remain anonymous. For now." The phone rang the next morning. I didn't answer. Neither did I open the email from my aunt that said simply, "Is this what you've been doing all these years?" I knew it was only a matter of time before the call came from my mom. And it did. Not a voicemail. Not a text. She called me in the middle of a Thursday lunch rush, as if nothing had changed in the past decade. "Madison, we saw something about you on the news," she said, her voice thin and confused. "Someplace for soldiers? Is that your bar?" I hesitated, just for a second. Then I said, "Yes, it is." Silence. Then, "Why didn't you tell us?" I almost laughed. But I didn't, because that question deserved a real answer, but not over the phone. And definitely not while I was standing behind a bar, holding a towel in one hand and the weight of 10 years in the other. "Maybe you should come see it for yourself," I said, then hung up. What I didn't expect, what shook me more than anything, was that she actually did. But that's the beginning of the real unraveling. I didn't really know what I expected when I told her, "You should come see it yourself." Some part of me thought she wouldn't, that she'd forget, or pretend to. But my mom didn't forget. She showed up. Exactly 1 week later, at 6 p.m. sharp on a Wednesday, right before our weekly quiet hour, she walked into Haven like she was stepping into a country club lobby. Beige dress, leather purse. That tight, polite smile she wears when she doesn't know the rules of a room but refuses to show it. I was behind the bar pouring chamomile tea. Jules was welcoming the group, going over the same gentle reminders about silence, no phones, no pressure to speak. Mom caught all of it. She was early. I gestured for her to sit by the front window. She didn't say a word, just nodded and quietly took a seat. No one else asked who she was. They're used to strangers sometimes coming just to sit and breathe. She stayed the whole 45 minutes, silent. Still. When the session ended, Tony, a regular retired Navy in his 60s, came over and gave me a small nod. "It was quieter tonight," he said, sipping the last of his tea. "That lady, your mom?" I nodded. First time she's seen what I actually do. He gave a half smile. "Bet it won't be the last," he said, then walked out. After everyone left, I stayed behind the bar washing glasses. My mom stood by the far end, eyes scanning the shelves like she was trying to understand something foreign in a language she never learned. "How long have you been doing this?" she finally asked. 6 years, I said, not looking up. 6. She repeated it slowly, like she was rewinding a decade of missed birthdays, unanswered texts, and quiet family dinners where she never asked the right questions. "You remember when I invited you and Dad to the opening?" I said, drying the last cup. "You both said it wasn't the kind of place our family should be seen at. That bars weren't respectable." She sat on a stool, her hands fiddled with her necklace, a habit I'd seen my whole life. It meant she was uncomfortable, maybe even a little ashamed. "We thought you were running away," she said, soft. "You left school, worked nights, didn't listen." "I wasn't running from anything," I cut in. "I was running toward something you never took the time to see." She looked down, then up at me. There was a long pause, not the cold kind we used to sit in, but the kind that needed space. "Last week," she said, "Aunt Mai sent me a link. An article. A healing space for veterans in Richmond, with a photo of you sitting with your back to the group. I read the whole thing. I didn't believe it could really be you." I shrugged. "Whether you believe it or not, it's real." "And you never told us," she said. It wasn't accusing. It was genuine confusion. I looked at her and said the one truth I'd been holding in for years. "It's not that I didn't want you to know. I just didn't want you to ruin it. To take it, reframe it, and only respect it once someone else gave it a gold star." Her eyes darted away. Then something I didn't expect happened. She apologized. "I'm sorry," she said, "for never asking the right way, for assuming I knew you, for letting expectations get in the way of actually seeing you." I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I didn't need to cry anymore to feel real. Still, inside me, something softened. A layer that had been locked down for years cracked a little. We sat there until almost 9 p.m. We didn't solve everything. We didn't pretend to. But something opened up that night. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't just see my mom as a parent. I saw her as a woman learning how to unlearn. What I didn't expect was what she'd do next. She went home and told my dad everything. And my dad, the same man who once called me a dropout who slings cocktails, decided he needed to see this place for himself. But he didn't come alone. He brought someone with him. Someone I hadn't seen in over 3 years. Someone whose name I didn't expect to hear again. And someone who, within weeks, would make my entire 6 years of anonymity explode in front of my entire extended family. At my cousin's engagement dinner. And after that night, there'd be no going back. I should have known my dad wouldn't come quietly. When my mom showed up at Haven, I assumed, naively, in hindsight, that the hardest part was over. That she'd go home, maybe soften a little, and they'd start seeing me not as the failure daughter, but as a whole person. But my family doesn't do soft. We do optics, control, appearances. So when my dad walked into Haven 3 days later, he didn't come to see. He came to assess. He showed up in a tailored Navy suit, on a Saturday morning, mind you, like he had to establish authority in a place where nobody asked him to. Behind him was a man I hadn't seen in 3 years, Jason Nguyen, former family friend, my brother's college roommate, once briefly, my boyfriend. It didn't end well. Jason had a clean corporate look, blazer, no tie, polished loafers, the kind of guy who orders black coffee but lets the barista know he understands Ethiopian single-origin beans. I was wiping down the bar when they came in. My stomach dropped, but I kept moving. "Morning?" I said, too even. My hands were suddenly damp. "Madison," my dad said, like he was greeting a stranger at a networking event. I brought Jason with me. He's consulting for the health department now. Thought it'd be good for him to see the space. Maybe offer some perspective. Right. Perspective. That word my dad always used when he wanted to remind me I wasn't thinking big enough or smart enough, or his way. Jason looked around, nodding slowly like he was touring a hotel he might buy. "Wow," he said. "Didn't expect this." I knew exactly what that meant. I didn't answer. I gave them the tour. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. If I'd refused, it would have confirmed everything they believed about me. That I was small, petty, not ready for real work. So I kept it professional. This is where we host the quiet hour groups. We don't record anything, no sign-in, just space and tea. I showed them the art wall. Hector's sketches, notes from vets, even a hand-drawn thank you from a teenager whose dad started attending sessions. I didn't say much else. I let the space speak for itself. After we looped back to the front, Jason crossed his arms. "You ever thought about expanding? Franchising this model?" I blinked. "It's not a product." He smiled, patronizing. "Everything's a product if you scale it right." And there it was. The reason I left that world behind. The reason I didn't go to pitch competitions or VC meetups or Thanksgiving dinners anymore. Because people like Jason always thought healing was just another vertical to monetize. My dad clapped his hands lightly. "This is impressive, Madison. Truly. But I hope you're thinking bigger than just Richmond." I looked at him. Really looked. "You haven't asked me a single question about the people who come here," I said quietly. "You didn't ask how many veterans we serve, or what trauma we see every week, or how we've helped prevent 4 suicide attempts in the past 6 months. You only asked if it could scale." That shut them up for a second. Then my dad cleared his throat. "I'm proud of you," he said, like the words had to be pulled through his teeth. "I just think you need help getting to the next level." I almost laughed. And that help would come from Jason? Jason raised both hands, fake humble. "Just here to support. We have some overlap in our initiatives. You'd be surprised how much funding is out there for programs like this, if they're presented the right way. Presented the right way. Because God forbid a woman like me, with a community college education and a quiet bar, be the face of something that worked. Thanks, I said, already done. But we're good. My dad pressed on. There's an engagement dinner next month. Your cousin Hannah and her fiancé. Big event. I think it'd be nice if you came. Reconnect with the family. Let people know what you've been doing. Let people know, I repeated. Not celebrate with us or we want you there. Just come perform your worth. Still, a small part of me said yes. Not because I wanted to be seen, but because I was finally ready not to care how I was seen. I said, sure. I'll be there. Jason looked surprised. My dad looked relieved. What neither of them knew was that the state had just approved a pilot partnership between Haven and 3 public health clinics. A program Jason's own office had tried to launch 2 years ago and failed. And the director overseeing our rollout? She'd be at the engagement dinner too. Turns out Hannah's fiancé worked at her law firm. Small world, right? Sometimes you don't have to shout for people to hear you. Sometimes all you have to do is walk into a room and let the truth echo on its own. And that room was coming. The night of the engagement dinner, I wore black. Not to make a statement, just because it felt clean. Simple, steady. The event was at the Lyric, a renovated theater downtown with vaulted ceilings and way too many waiters for what was essentially a giant cousin reunion. Everyone was in designer dresses and rented tuxedos, clinking champagne flutes and talking about tech stocks and destination weddings. I walked in alone. Nobody greeted me at the door, which was fine. I didn't come to be greeted. I spotted Jason first, already at the bar, holding court like he always did. He saw me and gave a small wave but didn't walk over. My dad was deep in conversation with a group of older men, lawyers probably, gesturing like he was explaining someone else's success. My mom spotted me next. She mouthed, "You look nice." And I gave a polite nod. It was the closest we'd come to warmth in months. Then I saw her. A woman in her early 40s, tall, sharp, calm, talking to Hannah's fiancé with that quiet confidence that only comes from knowing exactly who holds the room. That was Carmen Ellis, Director of Public Health Initiatives for the state of Virginia. She also happened to be my program's direct partner, and Jason's former supervisor. She caught my eye across the room and smiled. A real smile. We hadn't spoken in person since the partnership was approved. Just emails, Zoom calls, quiet negotiations. But I had told her very directly that I didn't want my name in the press releases. Not yet. So she kept her word. Until that night. Midway through dinner, Hannah's dad stood up for his speech. Usual stuff. How proud they were. How brilliant the couple was. How connected everyone had become through work and family and service. And then he gestured toward Carmen. We're especially honored tonight to have someone who's not just a leader in public health, but someone who's helped transform care for veterans and trauma survivors in our state. Carmen, would you like to say a few words? Carmen stood, glass in hand, calm as ever. I'll keep this short, she said. I'm here as a family friend, but I'd be remiss not to acknowledge a remarkable achievement that also intersects with this very room. She turned toward me, and everything in the room shifted, just slightly. Many of you know Jason Nguyen, she said. He's been instrumental in our department over the years, but what some of you may not know is that 2 years ago, Jason's proposal for a trauma-informed care initiative was shelved due to feasibility concerns. It lacked one thing: community. A murmur ran through the room. And earlier this year, she continued, that same model was revived. Not because of Jason, but because of a woman who built that community from the ground up, who created a sanctuary not for profit, not for optics, but for people. She raised her glass. To Madison Tran, founder of Haven Collective, our newest statewide partner. Silence, followed by slow, stunned clapping, not because it was rehearsed, but because no one knew what else to do. Jason's face was frozen. My dad's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch from across the room. My mom just stared, blinking, like she was finally seeing a version of me she didn't know how to place. I nodded at Carmen. Didn't stand. Didn't smile. I didn't need to. Because this time, the room clapped without me asking for anything. Later, Jason cornered me outside near the valet line. His voice low and tight. "You set me up." I looked at him. "You set yourself up. All I did was let the work speak." He shook his head. "You really think this makes you untouchable?" "No," I said, stepping into the night. "It just means I don't need you anymore." And that, I think, hit him harder than any headline ever could. I won't pretend everything magically healed after that night. My dad still struggles to ask about my work without suggesting how to improve it. My mom sends me health articles she doesn't fully understand. Jason? He moved to another department within a few months. Quietly. No farewell party. But I no longer shrink around them. I don't wear armor to family dinners. I don't fake humility to make them comfortable. I built something real. And now they know it. And more importantly, I know it. What I've learned is this. Closure doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes it arrives in silence. In people having to say your name out loud in rooms they once tried to keep you out of. If you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told to be realistic about something you knew mattered, I see you. And if this story hits close, leave a comment. Tell me when you finally stood your ground. And if you want more stories like this, the kind that don't beg for approval, but earn their space, you know where the subscribe button is. Thanks for listening. Truly.